You're
Okay,
on.
okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Looks like we have a full harbor board minus Bob Dolan, and we have Kurt Wallheater here from the assembly. So I'd like to entertain the approval of the minutes from the last harbor board meeting we had in November.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of November 25th harbor board meeting. Did you get a chance to look it over? Any changes or any problems with it? So all those in favor of approving the minutes of the last meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, amendment and approval of this meeting's agenda. Is there any changes that you'd like to make? I'd kind of like to move the raw fish tax presentation maybe under new business, because I think we need to take a position on this. And I don't know if we can do that under communication or not, but if that would be okay with the board, I'd like to move that under new business.
Okay with me.
No problem.
No, you entertain the motion. You'd entertain the motion.
Okay, somebody would like to make that motion?
I move that we move the raw fish tax under communications up to new business.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to move it under new business. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, any other changes to the agenda? Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda as modified.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Public hearing. Okay, what we have, I don't know if you guys have looked at it online. It's quite a lengthy document, but it is the Waterfront draft master plan with the financial considerations and a condition assessment of our facilities. So I'd like to open up for discussion, and if there's any public that would like to speak to it, any changes you'd like to see happen. This is the final draft, so what we're looking for is any discrepancies or changes that we feel needs to go into this plan. I think Gloria Ann had a couple of things that the harbor department came up with, some possible changes or things that she was concerned about that needed to go before the board.
Do you want to do that now, or do you? I suppose I can do it now. Or
Well, it's public
Okay,
hearing.
okay,
We should,
public hearing.
yeah. We
okay,
can,
the only thing that I've been, Liz and I and Steve have spent the entire last year dealing with this, and so over and over and over. It looks pretty good to us, or to me at least. The only thing on page 18, there's a sentence here that kind of, I don't know if they're talking out of turn or we're talking out of turn. It says on the second paragraph, borough residents are genuinely unwilling to assume municipal debt to finance harbor capital projects. Instead, they rely on local resources. I'd like to strike are genuinely unwilling to assume municipal debt to finance harbor capital projects. I think right now we're in the middle of paying off a loan, a revenue bond for the South Harbor. I think, I don't know, that just seems like it's, I don't know if they are genuinely unwilling. So I'd just like to strike that and just turn it into borough residents rely or genuinely rely on local resources, harbor new revenues, state matching funds, however, harbor, blah, blah, blah. So that's the only thing I thought. And then the other thing that I noticed was they have a lot, and it's probably because the public, they heard it a lot from the public, is the vast amount of launch ramps. It seems like a lot of projects include new launch ramps. How many launch ramps do we really need to maintain on the island? And so I could support an additional launch ramp in the South Harbor, perhaps, by putting another, if we were to ever get Kenny Madsen's property and put in an additional launch ramp there. But when we start talking about, especially the one at Scow Bay, I'm not talking about the new ramp should be designed with one. Okay, I'm on page 27. sorry. Second paragraph, under medium priority. I'm not talking about the one to accommodate another hydraulic or a hydraulic trailer. I'm talking about and an adjacent lane north of boarding float at a 14% rate for launching trailable boats. The launch ramp should expand in future to 4 lanes with a second boarding float. Currently, there's just not enough room. Every time we get a Dingle Johnson money to build a launch ramp, one of the things they put into the rules that you have to go by for 20 years, the one that we're going by now in the South Harbor sunsets in June of 2016, you have to provide 24 to 30 parking spots. So if we're talking an additional launch ramp for trailerable boats, you know, small boats, we're talking sport boats, you're going to have to also set aside a huge portion of that lot that can only be used for the vehicles used to haul those. So that's the only thing that I could probably say we could nix out of that. But I'm sure they heard it probably on the street in the public. But it's one more thing for us to build, and I would like to see that Scow Bay really concentrate more towards the boatyard or the hauling bigger commercial boats out, rather than setting aside a big portion of it for sport when we have a lot of other areas. If we are going to, you know, take on Papke's and rebuild that, we're going to, they've also advised of improving launch at Banana Point and Blackery. You know, that's a lot to maintain, and how many do we really need? So those were the only 2 things I have.
Okay, any discussion?
So do you think even at any priority level, that's just, that whole paragraph is just sort of misguided?
I think the part about a ramp to accommodate a hydraulic trailer for the commercial boats, that needs to stay there, but not an adjacent, adding yet another sport fish launch ramp.
Has there been any sketches or drawings about what it would look like on, anybody put it on paper?
Page 26.
Page 26?
I got a question on page 28, third paragraph. I'm sure they're meaning the decade time that they've mentioned earlier in the paragraph, but about the 4th sentence, it says spreading this increase over time would reduce the burden placed on users. Implementing an annual rate increase of the inflation rate plus 2% over the next would provide additional revenues. They don't really specify the time period there. I don't know if that's really important or not.
Oh, something should come after next?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of a typo.
Where is it?
Right there.
Oh,
There's a missing noun.
oh yeah. Okay. Wow, way to read in detail.
Yeah.
Jeez, spreading this one.
What would you suggest?
What would you suggest?
I don't know. There's some kind of time period there that I think they're implying, but I'm assuming maybe the decade with a question mark
Week?
per their
Oh yeah.
Week?
per
month,
their
year?
Liz, do you know what they genuinely?
I'm sorry, I lost what page you're on.
Oh,
28.
Yeah, that's kind of a big one. Okay, 3rd paragraph.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I think it's supposed to be 10 years.
Okay.
That's what they had.
10 years.
That's what I
It's
kind
in
of
the
figured.
financial considerations, they spell out a little bit
Yeah.
where it's,
Okay.
2% plus inflation for 10 years.
That makes
So
sense.
that-
All
Okay.
right.
I remember correctly.
Okay, so we'll make that little note.
Any other things that come to mind that you guys noticed?
I just have a general comment about the sequence of all this, and there's enough stuff in here for multiple meetings. and I think we've all been struggling with it. But it would also be nice if we could address these issues. I know we can't because there's a schedule for this, after your budget is established and after the state comes forward with its best offer on costs, what they would reimburse the borough for taking over the 3 harbors. And so it's just a lament that I have. I think the concept of this is good. On Scow Bay, on the ramp there, they're really putting some high numbers in there. And for years, both Reed Brothers and Rock and Road have said, we could put a good ramp in here, a gravel ramp that would hold up well for under $100,000, more like $50,000. And so there are options available there where, the community and through public-private partnerships could put something in there that wouldn't even have to involve Dingle Johnson. And so I would not like to see any ramp there nixed, but there's definitely room for one, and I think it would really be great for the community there, and the commercial businesses of both Rockies Marine and Hammers Marine would be able to use that. It would be nice. But the point of there's not 20 spaces for parking there if you're going to rely on Dingle Johnson funds. And so again, I like the concept of this in general, but not some of the details. But the details I think are going to have to be addressed with more meetings,
Well,
especially Pappy's Landing.
one thing we have to keep in mind that this isn't, like if we adopt this concept, this isn't written, cast in stone. I mean, if it goes, passes through the public scrutiny and then it goes to the assembly, this is more like a guide to steer us in a direction where the
Correct.
community is wanting to go.
That's why I like the word
but
concept.
The details, yeah, that's what it is. It's a concept. It's not like this is what we need to do. So we just have to keep that in mind when we're looking at these things. And I just would like to see us have some good common sense criticism of the things that we feel need to be changed, and further move it on to the assembly as something that we could use as a guideline for our concept into developing the future of our facilities. Does anybody have any other comments? After looking through the condition assessment, which I'm sure most of you did, and I see we've got a really nice colorful. It's kind of alarming to see what's coming down the line here as far as costs and how we're going to be able to come up with funding for South Harbor replacement and repairs and continue to do our annual maintenance like we're doing now. So this has got a lot of important numbers in it that we're going to have to take into consideration when we're talking about our savings for deferred maintenance. So anybody have any other issues with the comprehensive plan or the condition assessment?
This is our public hearing, so for anybody in
Yep.
the audience, this is your time to speak at this level. And then Liz, she's also, I think you can't vote on anything until further down in the agenda, but just to let you know that the Borough Assembly wants us to also, or you to also meet with a joint meeting with the
Planning and zoning.
Planning Commission, and have another public hearing. So I don't know if you want to talk about that now, when the good date is, or if you want to wait till we talk about it in the agenda.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to the plan and the direction that the community has given Nichols and Moffett and when they put this document together? Hearing, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but it's on the website. You can look at it that way. But it's pretty lengthy, and there's a lot of information in it. So if there's no other comments from the public, how about anybody else on the board have anything to address? Hearing none, I guess we could move on. We don't really need to vote on anything yet. We're going to have another public hearing with planning and zoning. That we'll be discussing at length with them as well. So I'd like to keep, everybody keep looking through this, and maybe when we look at land selection some of those type of things that will affect the harbor's future, should pay attention to that as well. That's coming up next week. And the planning and zoning is working with that as well, and Liz. Liz?
Mike, I was just gonna say, you know, if you have specific things that you want addressed or changed, it would be great to pass those forward to the planning commission, because planning commission ultimately is the one that's gonna say to the assembly, here's the document, we recommend approval or non-approval, and with these changes. So, you know, whatever changes, you know, the 10 years or the changes with the number of.
Well, you have it on the agenda right here to approve the Petersburg Waterfront Master Plan. You can make that
Okay.
what she
Part
said.
of that.
What we
so-
should do then is.
And the rationale for whatever changes you wanna make, so we can.
Is, we went through these changes that Glorianne had, and then a couple of other minor issues. Is there any changes that we need to make other than that? We could probably, I don't know if we need to vote on them, but we could agree
Can't do
to.
it until you're there on the agenda.
We could vote for the changes that we've come up with so far, strike that paragraph that Glorianne pointed out, and pare back on the attempted, I don't know how you feel about the launch ramp, but I'm not sure that that's a necessity that we need to have in the master plan.
What was the page go for the Scabier?
28.
20,
27.
Is the one about the 10 years, and then 27. is
27.
about contract. I mean, it's just all hypothetical anyway. I just wanted to point that out. We've got a lot of launch ramps on the island. And they're not cheap to put in, and they're not free to maintain. But if John, you know, but that not being said, if you don't, the state won't give you any money, I mean, especially in this time, unless it comes through Dingle Johnson. And how they get that money is off of every sport fish license they sell. A portion of it goes to Dingle Johnson. It's federal dollars. It comes through that state program to the municipality. And most of launch ramps are built using that in this day and age. Unless you do it out of pocket. So that's the only thing I was saying.
Well, how about just leaving the first sentence in there? As a medium priority, the Harbor Department should construct a new ramp at Scow Bay. It's
Yeah,
the,
no,
it's,
the
it's
only
the
thing I have
following
is an
stuff.
adjacent lane north of the boarding float at a 14% gradient for launching trailer boats.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
what scares me. Is
No, I agree. All those details should be worked out
Yeah.
at a future meeting.
Yeah. So yeah, leave it in, but just say that the difference of everything.
Well, we take notes on that, and then the other portion that you felt, and I think we agreed with, was removal of those other comments that the public portrayed as far as what we're not willing to take out bonds or loans for projects.
Mm-hmm.
So is everybody good with deleting that?
No problem. Yep.
Okay, so that'll be removed from our recommendation to remove that. Go to the planning and zoning. Anything else? Okay, well, if no one else has any other things that they'd like to discuss with this waterfront plan, I guess we could move it forward to the next hearing where we meet with Planning and Zoning Commission. So I'll close the public hearing. There's no more comments. And is there visitors' views unrelated to the agenda? Any visitors' views related to the agenda? Okay, I'll give you guys a chance if you want to speak when we get down to the presentation that Jody is going to give us about the funding for the police station. So, staff report, Glorianne?
Okay, it's a shorty. We've just been kind of holding things together as Eddie has been gone. And in between snow removal, we've been working on our 20-year-old 13-yard dumpsters. Rebuilding those. We also built the new paint float. Mike Luxon came to town to talk to the mayor, myself, and the manager about the potential transfer of the 3 remaining state-owned harbor facilities within the borough. He has been paying attention following the whole Supreme Court ruling, he got a hold of us right away after that happened and said, okay, you want to talk? And so he came down, we visited a little bit about it, and he said, what I'd suggest to you is that the assembly put in a formal request to him as the DOT representative to take on all three of them. And so at the last assembly meeting, Mayor Mark did that, polled the rest of the assembly. They said, yep, go for it. So they're writing a letter right now to ask that we sit down with the state and talk about negotiation of all three. There was support in that coming from Kupernoff because they are interested. They had already sent Mike a letter saying, hey, we want to talk about Kupernoff. So it seems like the Kupernoff folks were in support of that. So anyway, that's what they did there. We're working on the budget, and raw fish tax was finally made out in December, and we got $820,117,000. The general fund took the first $250,000, and so into the Harbor Enterprise Fund, $517,000, which is great. That was about 60% of our depreciation that we set aside. So anyway, that was it.
Okay, any questions?
Sixty-
Go ahead.
60% of what
In our budget
represents 60%
of our depreciation that we try and set aside between
So
Jody
that
and-
wasn't 100% of it.
There wasn't 100%. And it's been between 800 and we've moved it up to about $1 million because we added the drive down. So you got to look at replacing that in 45,
Yeah,
50.
so this is just for people to understand
Yes,
that what needs to be set aside every
Yeah.
year to build up a fund.
yeah, about $1 million is what we have in the budget right now.
To what level?
Well, if ideally, we don't have anything in we don't have a policy right now in place. We don't have a cap. I would genuinely like to see about 5 million set aside, and the reason why I put that number out there is because that is what is matchable at the state level. If you come up with 5 million, you can go to the state with 5. With that 5, they'll give you 5 to rebuild any municipal harbor float that they used to own. So I think that's a good place to start. Currently, we're at a little bit over 2 in that fund, so that helps. And we're looking at probably replacing the South Harbor 84 built floats in about 15 years. So that's going to be our next, probably big crisis. We'll have little crises in between then, I'm sure, but that's the little big project we're doing is the 84 floats.
So I think it's important that we, not only do we need the $1 million for those big projects, we have all these ongoing smaller projects that come up, like the office needs some repair work and remodel, and there's all these other little projects that add to that, which we try to work into the budget. I know the department tries to work that into the annual budget, but this $1 million is pretty minimal for what we really need when you look at a $15 million project to replace the South Harbor. So 5 is only going to get us 10 with matching, and we're still looking at having to possibly bond. So this is kind of I think a minimal amount that we need to really be conscious about saving
Each year.
on an annual basis. Plus our other, projects that are ongoing, repairs and whatnot. Okay, any other, one question I had, where's the new paint float going to be stationed?
Well, it's out in front of the office. They just built it and it came in yesterday, so sometimes we look at it.
Good.
So we have 2 now.
Okay, anybody else have any questions for Glow? Okay, unfinished business. PN&D bulkhead landing loading dock bid documents review.
So you have that in front of you. I didn't print that out and have it in your packet, but they're here now. This is the design. You do have the cost estimate. The base bid, which is, we have 1.26 million left in that bond, left in that legislative loan. And the base bid of what Somerville is proposing is 1.337. So 1.26. How much is that? You're looking at dipping into savings, whatever it is, under 100,000, 60,000, something like that. So.
Oh, it looks like we're ready to move towards,
We have to send it up to the
putting out
assembly
bid.
and, to move forward on the bids. So this is what I'm here. Would you like to send it up to the assembly or send it to the mayor to hopefully put it on the agenda on the 19th? That's the next assembly.
Well, the sooner we
meeting.
get out to bid, the sooner we'll be able to start the project.
It just kind of, we told the assembly this was coming. It's on their schedule. They've seen the schedule, so I think it's no surprise to anybody.
Okay, so we need a motion to go ahead and send this on to the assembly as it is.
I'd move.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of passing it on to the assembly to be bid ready for the near future here, so we can get going on this project, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. You have to excuse me for my voice. It's not quite 100%. I'm close. Okay, so now we're going to move on to, we approve the master waterfront plan. Okay, new business. Okay.
I think you need to make a motion to send this on to.
Did we do that? Okay. So we need a motion to approve the waterfront master plan, to send it on to the assembly for review. But I think we're gonna have to go through the process of another public hearing, aren't we, with planning and zoning? So I was thinking that might be the time.
Liz, do you want to
Well, it's
explain
up to
how this
Liz.
works again?
Sure. So I think your joint hearing with the planning commission, it probably will be focused more on waterfront land use than necessarily your facilities and things. So I think probably a good time now, since you guys are focused on the harbor facilities and what's going on with those, is to make your recommendations on this portion of the plan. And then with the planning commission, it's really, that would give us a chance to focus on some of the changes that are being proposed for land use on the waterfront throughout the borough, because it's changing. The recommendation is to change zoning to create specific waterfront categories where you'd only allow waterfront dependent uses in certain areas. And so it would be good to sort of get an understanding from the harbor board about, whether that makes sense, how we've laid out those general land uses for waterfront. And also, if I were you, I would probably request that as these, changes to zoning are made, or in the future, any requests to changes that they be run through the harbor board, if you're interested in that. So for instance, if we were gonna do a change, if the planning commission was gonna consider a change in land use that was industrial waterfront right now, it would behoove you to sort of have a chance to put your 2 cents into that kind of issue. So I guess in the nutshell, it'd be great if you could approve this with your recommended changes for this portion of it, and then we could focus on the land use questions at the joint meeting. If that makes sense.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the changes that we made, the minor changes. And
How about if
send it on?
I just wrote this down for you.
Okay.
How about if somebody makes a motion to recommend the planning commission and borough assembly adoption of the proposed Petersburg Waterfront Master Plan 2015 with changes to page 28, added language of 10 years in that one sentence. Any other changes you want to make?
18.
Huh?
Page
Page 18.
You're gonna strike?
Strike that.
Oh, yeah, and page 18, striking the genuinely unwilling part. Anything
I wonder
else?
where they got that.
I thought you were gonna strike something in 28 or 27,
Well, I mean,
or just change the wording.
Yeah.
Yeah, do we
it's
wanna-
just
Page
my-
27.
do you wanna do that? That was just my 2 cents.
I just have to, I mean, if it's okay, I just have to ask, really, do you think you should have 4 lanes of recreational boat launch ramp at Scout Bay?
No.
Seems a little excessive.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it seems.
Four lanes?
Yeah, 4 lanes. I could see leaving it in there to have one, but
I only saw the 4 lanes.
I just think that's, I know it's aspirational in nature, but
Well, what was the point of more than one lane? Different degrees of slope?
It depends on the
Nobody had to wait. in
shape of the
line.
keel and a whole bunch of variables.
But they're looking at different angles for different ramps.
No, they're
No.
doing one for the hydraulic trailer. Keep that in. We like that. Then they're asking to do one and then possibly 4 more or 3 more for the 14 trade.
Okay, a different grade.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just for the
Steamboat.
trailer boat.
Steamboat.
Those are the sport boats.
I think these are engineering details that should be worked out in the future. And that's why I would suggest just leaving it, the harbor department should construct a new ramp at Scow Bay
And then strike everything else.
and strike
Yeah.
everything
Okay.
else out.
There we go.
Like
Yeah.
that.
If you guys decided to, at some future date, that you needed the 4 lanes, how hard would it be to add it in?
That's,
It wouldn't
that's what
matter.
I'm saying, this isn't
Yeah.
cast in
Yeah.
stone. It's
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
it must have got some input from some sport fishermen that decided that, you know, hey, we need more ramps or
Yeah,
something.
more
And
the
I'm
better.
sure that's where they probably got this to put in there. But in reality, we could do that, but it's not something that, like, this is what you need to do.
Right, right.
And the fact that it's medium priority anyways doesn't,
Yeah.
there's lots more stuff on high priority.
Okay, so what do we
Okay,
have
so
far?
the motion to recommend the planning commission and borough assembly adopt the proposed master plan 2015 with changes on page 28, the language adding 10 years, page 18, striking the genuinely unwilling, page 27, strike everything after that first sentence on
Mhm.
medium priority.
I would like to move that, we do those things.
Second.
A second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the changes and forward the recommendation onto the assembly and the planning and zoning commission. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, thank you. So now, what we need to do is, I'm gonna let Jody give us a little rundown on what's happened, but before we do that, I would like to go over a real quick history of where raw fish tax, and prior to the state turning the harbors over to the municipalities, the raw fish tax was all going into the general fund. And once we realized that we were going to be in charge of maintaining these facilities and replacing them, we went to the city council at the time, and then later on we've gone to the assembly, and slowly tried to wean, so to speak, the general fund budget off of raw fish tax. So it was at 05, we had it down to the general fund retained the first 500,000 of the raw fish tax, and the harbor got the rest of it. And then we ratcheted it down, and now at this point in 2015, the general fund retains 250,000, and the harbor retains the rest. And that's what we're trying to build our reserves with, so that down the road we'll have money to repair and replace the facilities as they wear out. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to Jody, so she can give us an idea of what's planned for possible funding for the police
Sure,
station.
and just to add on to what you said, one of the main reasons that the Borough Assembly ratcheted it down each year is because you guys had so many huge projects, the North Harbor being one of them, that we could see, and Harbor Board included, that you were gonna need more funding for, that you couldn't afford to finish without this, so. The attachment I passed out is just the proposed funding plan. As you can see, 54% of the building remodel will be from state grants, 27% from the general fund and property development fund, 1% from the E911 surcharge fund, and then 5% from land sale proceeds, and the remaining 13% from a loan. Now, the loan is dependent on many items. I made the little note at the bottom there. The initial bid, how much of the $700,000 contingency is used. And of course, you know, with the building remodel, usually a lot more of contingency is used rather than if it was a new construction. And then if other revenues are not found for the project, we could possibly use fish tax, but we found a lot of parcels that we're looking into selling for the borough, ones that we don't know why we still own them. The mapping system has changed from AutoCAD to GIS, and in doing so, they're able to identify parcels pulling from our tax maps that the borough owns, that I'm looking at it and saying, oh, you know, why do we own this? Could we possibly sell it? So that's kind of, they're going through different departments right now in the process to get the okay, because maybe Donnie needs one for Parks and Rec for a trail, or maybe Joe needs one for a SEPA easement, or, you know, that type of thing. So it's not something that I'm banking on, but it's out there that I want to look at. Also in our budget policy that was adopted this year, it's adopted every year, it says that the borough will designate 50% of the previous year's annual general fund surplus, defined as the difference between revenues and transfers in and expenditures, and transfers out into the property development fund for the purpose of financing major capital maintenance and repairs. So I'm also hoping that if we have a surplus, that we would use that money first to pay down a loan, not knowing how much that loan's gonna be right now, before we looked at possibly using some of the fish tax money. So there's a lot of ifs. And in fact, I was talking at the last meeting about possibly putting it on a supplemental budget for this next coming reading, but I can't, because I really don't know, you know, what we're asking for. And so I'm just going to put on the supplemental budget the transfers from the property development funds and the general fund. But that component really can't be looked at again until the project's finished and we know how much we've spent. So I maybe used too strong of language about using the fish tax in my presentation to the assembly, and I probably scared everyone, but I need some sort of backup plan to pay for this. And let's say worst case scenario, we needed $1.3 million, and the general fund didn't have any surpluses, we didn't sell any land. My plan was the harbor would get $350,000 of the raw fish tax first. The general fund would still get their $250,000. I don't know how we would make it in the budget without that. And then I would need $174,000 a year to pay down the loan. And maybe if there's a bigger payment of fish tax that year, we could just make a balloon payment and get it done with. But again, that is like worst case scenario. And so I understand that the harbor board needs to, you know, build up the reserve. And I feel comfortable with that $5 million number. I know right now your rates are covering approximately 10% of your depreciation, and then the remainder is covered with fish tax, which doesn't cover all of it, and it's gonna get worse and worse as you get more and more projects. So, and maybe there's some projects you can identify that are being depreciated that you know that you're not going to rebuild. I mean, we should just look through that fixed asset.
Was a thought of borrowing the money, I know talk about borrowing it from the electrical fund.
Yeah.
Was it thought about borrowing it from the harbor reserves? And paying the harbor
No,
reserves?
because the harbor still has a lot going on. And the harbor only has about $2 million in reserves. So that would pretty much deplete your reserve fund.
What is, how does Joe feel would work for you to, you've got enough in reserves to allow for the loan to work and get paid back in a,
As long as there's a repayment provision in there, yeah, absolutely. We have long-term goals for that, but not in the short term.
okay, Kurt?
This is a question for Jody. Jody, what do the current rate of interest on, on the enterprise funds now?
Investments?
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah.
1.16.
So we're getting 1.16. So we're
Right.
actually going to pay
Very low
him.
risk investments. That's why it's because on your end, as it should be.
Okay, anybody have any?
So, sorry, so the Power and Light would get paid back 1.5% interest, and I picked that because that's currently what the Water and Wastewater Fund is paying to ADC for their loans. 1.5%.
Anybody have any questions, Bob?
Maybe that's why everybody came, but I think what most of us are worried about is that no matter how you slice it, taking money, the raw fish tax, it's gonna come out of reserves, and then to build those back up, it's gonna probably be on harbor rates, and that's based on the length of your boat, and the longer boats usually bring more tax in, and it just doesn't seem fair that the size of your boat should determine the proportion you're paying for the new police station. It just seems like it should be independent of your boat length, or whether or not you have a boat at all, even so.
Well, I think it's one thing to talk about length of boat, but what it amounts to is the people that are gonna be paying for this are just commercial fishermen. Because it's raw fish tax that they paid to the state that's coming back, then that's what that money's coming from. It's not coming from yachts, it's not coming from boats like the RV, it would be coming strictly from commercial fishermen. And then,
But
that's
the
another
commercial
way.
fishermen, I just want to point this out, the reason why we have such a large police force, one of the reasons is because of the harbors and the transients that come to town, the county workers, the crew members.
Yeah, but it still seems to me, though, it's disproportionately taxing the commercial fishermen on a project that belongs to the community. Should be like a community effort on this project. And I stated that early on, so this is no surprise to you guys. I think I emailed you sometime this summer, and I heard we were gonna use raw fish tax.
We've transferred millions of dollars of general fund money into the project, which is sales tax, property tax.
Well, I was thinking of all community members. I mean, one of my suggestions to you guys earlier this year, sometime in, I think it was middle of July or sometime, when I heard we were gonna do this, was that I thought every citizen of Petersburg should put their shoulder to the wheel in this project. Everybody should, maybe we should think about a 0.5% city sales tax. No exemptions. If you're gonna buy anything in town, I don't care how old you are, I don't care if you're 65 years old or if you're 16 years old. Everybody should be paying for this municipal building, not just commercial fishermen. And I stated that, and I still believe that, and that's why I'm gonna mention it now.
Well, hopefully we won't have to go to this length,
Mhm.
but I think this is what, I understand where Jody's coming from, where we've got to have a backup plan, and that's what this is all about. And I agree with you. I mean, there might be a more equitable way to come up with that funding, but it's just something that would have to go before the voters, and I mean, we're talking about dragging out a process that I'm just not sure how else to go about it, but I'm just concerned about the future of every time a project comes up, they reach out and grab our raw fish tax, and that's what scares me.
I think we're gonna start seeing this more and more, though, in this community, because the state's no longer giving us all the revenue sharing that they have. They're certainly not gonna give us any more grants. So when we have, financial needs in this community, I think we're all gonna have to sit down someday and really do some soul searching and see what it is that we can live without, or what are we willing to pay for? Nothing's free. I mean, we lived for 36 years, I think, what I figured out. 2000, oh wait, it was 1981 when we all got our first permanent check. And those were glorious days, and so now that is over. You know, the state no longer has money to throw at us. So if we're gonna see any projects, you know, coming into this community, we're all gonna have to decide whether or not, as a community, if we want this project. And then we're gonna have to either put up, you know, or not have the project. We shouldn't just be tapping into something that, you know, just one particular person is paying for. I mean, right now, Mike gave me a piece of paper here this morning that showed that 444 commercial fishing permits in Petersburg. We have 444 people that are going to be paying, as far as I'm concerned, disproportionately for this municipal building, because they're the ones whose shoulders it's now based on paying back if we need to go to the extent of using raw fish tax. When there's probably how many taxpayers in this community? I mean, why is it just one user group that's being penalized? I mean, how many people sitting in this room outside of the commercial fishermen have the first 3% of their check taken off the top?
4.
You know?
It's gonna be 4.
Oh, it's going to be 4. Oh, yeah, I forgot. The governor's talking about increasing it. How would somebody at Hammer and Weekon got a paycheck from Hammer and Weekon, and off their gross stock they notice that 4% just came off the top? 2% or 2.5% goes to the state. 1.5% comes back to the municipality to spend how they wish. I mean, I think this is why we started this 20 years ago, I think, to get the raw fish tax into the hands of the people that actually create it, so that our rates don't have to go up significantly every time somebody wants to build a project in this town. I understand it going up expeditiously, you know, maybe up 1% every year, whatever it takes, you know, to cover their costs. But we shouldn't be living in fear that we're going to have to be footing the whole boat for, you know, keeping our boats in the harbor. I did a little math today, and I'm paying $2 a square foot per year for my vessel. I want everybody to sit down and do the math real quick in their heads now. How much would that cost you in property tax? If you had to pay $2 per square foot to lease property from the city instead of having any equity built in your property at home. That'd be like $10,000 a year for me, for city, you know, for property tax. So we're contributing. I mean, and I don't think we should have to, you know, disproportionately contribute all the raw fish tax to this community and these kind of projects. I think everybody in this community needs to agree that this is what we want, and we should all put our shoulders to the wheel.
Okay, well, where I think we need to go with this, as far as my feelings are, is I appreciate Jody coming in and letting us know. I mean, because it was kind of in a gray area when it was brought before the assembly last week, and now it's spelled out here as far as an idea of how we can go about this. And my feeling is I would like Kurt to carry the message of concern from the Harbor Board that if they do go down this road, that we need to come up with some sort of a policy in the future that makes it cut and dried, so we don't live under the guise of understanding that maybe the money's going to be there or maybe it's not going to be there. We can't carry on and try to build reserves if we don't know if that money's going to be there next year or not, or it's going to be grabbed for some other project. And I think that's what needs to be set in policy with the assembly. That's my own feeling. I think we need to have some assurance. Bob and then John.
Well, one thing that would help me is if we could see which things we're saving for on depreciation. I mean, like Jody said, maybe we could defer some of that depreciation even farther. Like,
It's all in your waterfront master plan right here, page number.
Every single one is.
Yeah, every one, and
So
it's
of that
spelled out.
of that 1 million we need per year, it's broken down.
Well, yeah, here we got, I mean, if you look at the general harbor department improvements, which include, you know, things like department maintenance shop, harbor office upgrades, because we got a 35-year-old public restroom, we acquiring petromarine property, all those kinds of things are all listed here. It's $9 million for general harbor improvements, the North Harbor repairs, art, because it's a brand new building.
Is that the financial
It's
consideration?
on page 29 on North Harbor are things like replacing the skiff float that's 65 years old and a 50-foot launch ramp, or I mean 50-foot pedestrian ramp. things like the North Harbor grid. Here's all that listed at 2.4. Here are your Middle Harbor repairs, the approach, the trestle going out there. We gotta replace that in the next 10 years.
So we can get a proportional
Here you look
number
at
here, but
South
the
Harbor.
absolute, a yearly number would be helpful, like, as we're talking about. I mean, this is an overall
Yeah,
indefinite.
no, it's all spelled out here, Bob, in the next, everything is given a high priority. High priority is listed as 0 to 5 years. Medium priority is 5 to 10, and low priority is 15. And everything has a listed, we've done that here. So you
Right.
can go through and,
Okay, well, just for example, how much a year do we need to set aside for replacement of the drive-down dock in 45 years?
well, it cost us, if you could figure out what that is gonna cost in, what would that be?
2065.
That's what I'm
25.
saying, that's what I'm saying. Could somebody figure that out so we can see
Yes,
it?
and Jody does it, and it's $1 million.
Yes, and I'd like to compare.
Just for the drive-down dock?
No,
No,
it's
no.
$1 million total for
Oh,
all
I
of
know,
the
but
harbor
for each
projects.
one, like, maybe I'm willing to say the drive-down dock, it was sort of a blessing and a gift. I'm not willing to put any depreciation towards it. If we have to
Oh, I
rebuild
see.
it, I'm gonna say no. If we have to rebuild it with our own money in 45 years, I'm willing to say, no, we'll just let her go.
I see.
That's what I wanna know.
The only real thing I would say that we probably don't need to save money for is the North Harbor launch ramp. I think we should rethink about retiring that. But realistically, I got user groups for everything else. I mean, I don't, right now we have a full harbor, so I can't say getting rid of A float or B float or a portion of it. I don't know, the skiff floats, we don't have a lot of fluff.
But I'd like to see that.
Okay.
And so we look
What's
at it.
I would say the North Harbor launch ramp.
What's the status on the North Harbor grid? North
It
Harbor
is high
tidal.
priority.
What?
In 5 years, we have to change those things up. 5
So
years.
is it on your depreciation
It's-
schedule?
It's right
It's all
here
in there.
on
I mean,
page
my
29.
question is why? I mean, to me, it should just be removed.
Well, look at your condition. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
The North Harbor, there's a lot of people that would
Would
say
cry,
they need it,
but I
yeah.
mean,
Sure,
that's,
sure. And so should probably, there are gonna be a lot of people that use that say that, maybe the stalls these guys tie up in should go away, cause they don't use them. Or the small stalls, we
Right,
can haul out
right.
Murgises now, don't replace any of the 32 footers. I mean, whoa, you if we wanna start pitting, here it all gives you which priority, 0 to 5 years, the North Harbor, the North Harbor, that's why we come to you with the project list, and we get to decide which we're gonna rebuild. And the North Harbor was the last big rebuild project, and I'm telling you that the next big rebuild project will probably be the South Harbor. The North Harbor grid portion, we're looking at 120,000.
Right.
So it's probably something we can do in the annual maintenance. But all of these things.
And another thing to keep in mind is, we're planning in 2015 dollars, so it's just an unknown as to what these projects are gonna cost in the future, so you're better to.
The other thing that would help is, like you mentioned, a possibility, Jody, of maybe $150,000 a year payment out of raw fish tax toward like an interfund loan. What would that do, just for example, to the existing rate structure if we had to offset that with a rate increase? That'd be a useful tool for me to, is that gonna be a,
So I forecasted out for 10 years, the harbor getting $350,000 of fish tax each year. They would have $200,000 of capital projects each year, just every year, because I have no idea how much you're gonna have every year. Forecasted that with minimal rate increases, maybe 3% every 3 years, which doesn't even keep up with inflation. You would have $5 million in 10 years. But, that's saying you would have $200,000 in capital. Who knows? Maybe, you're gonna replace all your ramps. So maybe that's gonna cost $800,000 one year. But maybe one year or a few years, you're only gonna spend $20,000 on whatever. And then, or maybe you're gonna, buy property. I don't know. So, but that's what I was looking at.
John?
Does anyone know what the intent of the legislature was when they passed this law? They usually have like a mission statement or a summary intent.
Trust me, I looked. And I haven't emailed anyone, but I think at one point when I first started working for the borough, I did, because, it was such a hot topic, and the general fund was keeping $500,000 a year. And they said it's for the borough or the city at the time to use as they saw fit.
Okay. And another question, and a comment, is I really appreciate all the audience that we have today. It's pretty rare, and especially want to solicit anybody's comments on this. I see lots of commercial fishermen here, so we would really appreciate that if anybody wants to enforce what we're talking about, or would you like to see more money into the police department and less into the harbors temporarily, or vice versa?
Yeah, Joe?
You got one.
Well, I agree with everything that you and Kurt, Bob, Mike have said. But with the raw fish tax already allocated, if we have to dip into it, and they borrow that from our reserve fund, harbor reserve fund, they're gonna borrow from the reserve electrical fund, rather than reallocate or reach in and just grab, it's already allocated, and then borrow from our fund.
Good point.
Borrow from us and take
It's
from
gotta be
electric.
paid back from somewhere, and that's where they're using the
That's
raw
where
fish
they're-
to pay
Well, yeah,
back.
we have
Sure.
to pay back with adequate compensation.
Yeah.
That sort of language changed when we became a borough, with the enterprise funds loaning money to the general fund and vice versa. You can't just give it to someone or a different fund now. You have to pay back with compensation.
Kurt?
And I noticed, Jody, in your language here, you said, I hate talking to you with my back to you, but anyway, just pretend like I'm looking at you.
Just pretend.
You said that you're not listening.
Normal.
Normal, okay. Anyway, you said for not more than 8 years at 1.5% interest, and you've got this schedule set up for 10 years. My question to you is, if you're gonna give the harbor the
What
first,
do I have to set it for 10 years?
you said you got this schedule set up for 10 years, that you were gonna just give the harbor
Oh, the harbor,
350,000?
yeah, you know what, and I never changed that after 8 years. I just left it at 350 for the harbor of fish
Okay.
tax.
Okay, so my question to you then is, if you have to dip into this, and if for some reason the assembly votes for this, the first 350 goes to the harbor, then the next 250 goes into the general fund, and then our loan back to the electrical, or whoever we borrow the money for, is 180?
I know, 174.
Okay, I just put down, okay, 175, that'll be easier for me to figure. Okay. So anyway, then that's only 775,000.
Right, and
What if we have
10-year
another
average of
900?
Fish tax is $800,000.
Okay, so what if we have another year where we have 811,000 coming in?
Well,
Where does the
like
rest
I
of that
said
money go?
before,
Balloon,
Huh?
balloon payment.
I said I would probably just do a balloon payment to pay down the loan faster.
Okay, at 1% interest, or would that just go against the principal?
It would just go against the principal.
Okay. So, and then at some point then, are we gonna have language here that says that once we pay this loan off, that we revert back to 250 going into the general fund, and then the rest of it goes back into
That's entirely up to
the,
you and the rest of the assembly.
okay.
And that's why, the point I was trying to make is, I think that's, if this does go through, and if they do get to the point where they need to borrow this money, that when this is over, we need to put it into policy that this is what it's gonna be, so that we can carry on business with knowing that we're gonna be getting anything over 250. And not say, oh, well, this year we've gotta fix the swimming pool, we need to borrow another 350,000 or whatever, and take it out of our, I think we need that set, so we know, so we can plan ahead.
So we got some huge expenses coming down the road here in the next 15 years. And I think most of the people in this community think that we're all filthy rotten rich. You know, there's a handful of people that probably are that status, but I would say the majority of the fishermen that I talk to and that I know aren't that wealthy.
Especially after this year.
You know, yeah. Well, there's going to be several more years like this. You know, I talked to a couple of the processors, and they said they don't see any end in sight here with the decrease in fish prices because the market has kind of gotten messed up with, you know, the political economics in the world and all that stuff. So embargoes and things like that. So anyway, my point is that, you know, we need to start generating as much money in this budget reserves for the harbor, and I agree with you, Mike, $5 million is not enough. If the state's only gonna give us $5 million, we got a $14 million project in the South Harbor if we started tomorrow.
Today's dollars.
In today's dollars, yeah. In my experience, once you get over $10 million, every year you delay a project, it increases by nearly $1 million. So, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know there's going to be another $15 million added to that project in the South Harbor. So, you know, you're looking at nearly $30 million to do what you can do today at $14 million. So, anyway, I really do think, again, you know, this community is going to have to sit down and decide what we can either live with or live without. And as much as I hate to say it, you know, I think everybody needs to participate in that process. And I mean, not just financially, but you know, by putting some thought into it.
Okay, well, I think you get the drift of the concerns of the harbor board. Is that, am I safe to say that you could bring that to the assembly? And I appreciate Jody bringing this to us and letting us know exactly what the plan was. And I really appreciate people coming to listen so you guys get a better picture of what's going on.
Is that something you guys want to vote on and actually put it into language? So all I'm doing is representing a statement that you guys have made. I mean, you put it under new business so that you guys could take action on this.
It's up to the board. What's your wish? Would you like to make a motion to send our formal request that we understand the future of our raw fish tax and that the assembly does something about it? Or what do you guys think?
I might, but I'd still like to add something in there, if you could bear with me for a second. Is this our, that's our operating revenues, right? A little over $1 million. So if we were to pay $100,000, if we're going to receive $100,000 less raw fish tax, does that mean we'd have to have a 10% rate increase to
Well,
make up for
it
that?
just decide, this is the philosophical question that this Waterfront Master Plan tried to go get in the financial portion of it. They suggested that we have 4 million in our reserves at the end of 10 years. And the way they got there was raising rates 20%, which would bring us, right now they say we're covering 90% of our operation with the amount of maintenance that we do and we continue to want to do, as well as annual operations, plus the annual cost of doing business. What do you call that? Cost of doing business, inflation. So at the end of, so that we would raise rates 20%. That's where they were coming from.
But what I'd like to see is any discussion of reducing that $500,000.
Yeah.
We get 200. Anything over 250, we get now. Is that right?
At this point.
Any discussion of reducing that amount, I'd like to see that translated into percentage of the
Right now,
rates. What rates would have to do to make up for that, so we can all make an informed decision. That $150,000 a year
I see.
out of raw fish tax, does that mean a 15% rate increase?
Well-
I haven't got an answer from anyone yet.
Well, and
Well-
maybe I can help answer
Yeah.
that. You know, your fish tax amount that you get every year fluctuates so much. 2 years ago,
Right.
the harbor got $949,000, and this year you got $570. Did you raise rates to make up for that? No, you didn't, because it's just going into your reserve. It's building up. So basically, your reserve just isn't going to build up as quickly if we
and
take some
every
money out
year
of the
we
fish
go
tax.
to, the auditor comes in and says, gosh, the harbor's doing okay, they're covering their operations, they're covering a little bit of their maintenance, but they're not hitting their that magic $1 million number. This year we were able to cover with the raw fish tax about 60%. So if you reduce it by, the auditor's going to go, unless the assembly says you must by next year make that $1 million, and then you would be forced to raise rates 100%, because right now we take in 1.2. If we have to come up with another $1 million, that's
I'd
double.
like to see that included in
that.
I just want to say,
So
part of what they did for that financial considerations is they did a life cycle cost analysis. And so we have the spreadsheet, that shows, like, if you took the maintenance and capital costs of this project and then increase the cost over inflation of what how much you have to spend each year for major maintenance and replacement, and they broke it out per year. And it's just kind of a on paper version, if you actually went by the book and said, we're definitely going to spend, each year what we're supposed to spend to maintain these facilities and replace these facilities. It kind of gives you like the paper version of it, not the reality version of it. But that's how they came up with a $4 million is what they're recommending balance. They're not saying $4 million necessarily like as your target. They're saying you should have $4 million
at all
so
times.
that so that you can pay for things.
So when you
up
go
and
to
down.
Matt,
but that is also we
I
actually
get
have
it
the
though. I'm just
numbers.
talking apples to apples.
What?
$2 million?
We have 2 in savings after building the
Of
North
course, yeah,
Harbor,
it's there.
just a couple years ago. Yeah.
I just want apples to apples, all things equal. If the city, if the borough diverts $150,000 of raw fish tax, everything else equal, what do we have to do to our mortgage rates? It's that simple. Am I just? Do you guys get what I'm saying?
10.5%.
Exactly. So let's talk about that so we know. So
If
Joe
you're-
knows what his rates are going to go up, and I know what my rates are going to go up.
Well,
And say that's what I'm paying for the police station with, and that's what someone who doesn't have a boat in the harbor is not paying for the police station, and we can decide.
It's not just the boat owners, it's commercial, if you're talking about using
Well,
raw
it's a-
fish tax.
I'm talking about a rate
It's a boat
increase to
owners.
make up for the diverted raw fish tax.
All the boat owners.
Anyway, go ahead.
John?
I'm the newest member here, so I don't know what your schedule is for the budget, but isn't that coming up next meeting? And could your budget show exactly the information that we're after? And is that timely enough, or do we need to take action now?
We never meet it. We never have met our depreciation number.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you right now, I will have to double all rates in the harbor to save that magic number. So we're not going to do that because you have to go through the process. So no, I mean,
Okay.
I understand the exercise, but to make it real simple to you, we have to save $1 million. Right now we take in 1.2. What does that mean? I'd have to double everything. I would have to double the transient rates. I'd have to double your mortgage rate. I'd have to double. If you're only going to take in 60%, realistically, we should raise rates 40%. If you're gonna, like she said, 2 years ago, we took in 900, we were only down 50,000. Well, that's that's 5% or whatever. So if we're gonna shoot for 350, the difference between 350 and $1 million, it's
You answered my question.
65% is what we should raise all rates across the board in order to save $1 million and put into that fund annually.
But if you're gonna get
But we never do
50%
that.
match, then really. you
That's
should
what
say $500,000.
that's what we've decided for years, is that we feel like 5 million is a good point to shoot for. So yeah, coming back with half of that number, which is 500,000. So
everybody's understand what
Yep.
she's trying to make. Okay,
Mhm.
so Kurt, what I think, if I'm not mistaken, what you're looking for from the board is to give you a statement from the board that says we're not okay with this, We'd rather see it paid for by more of the public.
Well, what I was thinking, I was just gonna, I don't want to take all the tools out of the toolbox there for Jody, but what I would, want you guys to maybe consider on some kind of a, I can't say resolution per se, but it can be, I suppose, is that you would like to have some kind of policy in place so that when this loan has been satisfied, that there is a policy that would return the raw fish tax back to the harbor, at whatever rate that you guys have decided upon. You know what I mean? I mean, because right now we're at 250 and we're supposed to be going down, but she claims we can't live without it. But so if you guys are comfortable with 250, say then the first 250 goes back into the general fund and the rest then comes back to the harbor, something like that.
So they don't get in the habit of.
Yeah.
And that, so it's clear to everyone.
Yeah,
And
so
I-
it's
and
got
I
a sunset
think
on this, it's got a sunset on this,
This loan and
this,
payback.
yeah, the loan payback
Okay,
schedule.
my own personal feelings is I think that 250 is necessary in the general fund for support of other infrastructure that the harbor users depend on. And I think it's only fair. I mean, we helped pay for the Cabin Creek to increase the water supply to the canneries. There's all these different things that come into play that the borough needs to have a certain amount of funds. And I think 250 myself is a pretty good number to shoot for. And I would like to see a guarantee that anything over that 250 in the future would go directly to our reserves.
Something I might add, I'm not going to put this in that the resolution, but what I might add is that most of the boat owners that contribute this extra funds into the general fund also pay property tax and also pay city sales tax, which also goes into the general fund to pay for the infrastructure that the city is, that every person in the city gets a chance to use. So I believe that the fishing fleet has probably disproportionately contributed more money into the general fund than most citizens are. And that has been my biggest complaint all along. And that's where I'm coming from, is that, it'd be one thing if we weren't taxpayers, on top of bringing revenue into this community that's new revenue, not just passed around revenue, revenue from commercial fishing and at one time from logging and from, from anything that extracts from natural resources was new money into this community. There's a lot of old money kind of circulating around in the community, which is good. You got to have that too. But what I'm saying is that if you guys are comfortable with contributing $250,000, then let's drop a resolution that after this loan is satisfied, it sunsets, we go back to the way we are, status quo. But I mean, I'd like to have something from you guys so that I have something that I can stand on when I'm sitting there talking to my constituents there and on the people on the assembly.
Okay, Nancy, got
I think it's all good to say that, but the problem is once you do that, you can say you're gonna sunset it all you want, but once you dip into this like this, you're opening it up. You can say you put a sunset on it, but you've just done it. You just dipped into this savings account. And I think just the next project down the line, you're gonna.
Well, that's why it needs to go in policy, in the statutes of this
In the actual
ordinance.
statute.
It goes into, this is what it's going to be, but that's where it's not now. It's
Right.
They can just take as much as they want,
Right.
basically.
So it needs to go into a resolution that the assembly votes on that says, okay, we'll use this money up to a certain point, and then once that loan has been satisfied, then that it just becomes null and void, and it goes back to status quo. So that has to be in language, though, because I remember one time that we had a 1% increase city sales tax for I believe it was the old swimming pool, that I think we're all still paying for. Never went away.
You're not.
Well, no, what I meant was we're not paying for the old swimming pool. I'm just saying, that 1%,
I don't know how,
1% never went away.
I do not know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Can you do
Yeah.
policy like that, Jody?
No,
You
can't.
can't.
I don't think you
You
can.
can't.
No.
Yeah.
You can't tie the hands of future assembly
Yeah,
members,
you'd have
and
to
they're in
pass that
control
every
of
year.
what you do with the fish tax. They can choose this year to give all of the fish tax to the general fund.
It's a good point, because the state could do the same thing, right? They
Yeah.
could just take it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
This might not even.
Well, I think it would be short-sighted of an assembly to to take all the raw fish tax from the people that actually generate it, that it gets taken right out of their
Well,
paychecks.
I'm not saying that they would, and I wouldn't advise that either.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we worked really hard on ratcheting it down so the harbor could have the majority of it.
Appreciate it, too.
Yes, it's very helpful. So how does the board want to deal with this?
Well, I guess we can't do anything.
Well, we can at least convey the message.
Yeah, right.
And I don't think we need to make a,
Okay.
Like, I'm a harbor user, and I devote very little fish tax money to that 3%, soon to be 4%. But I sure appreciate the fishermen that do pay that fish tax in big ways, like $10,000 or $20,000 a year.
And keep your mortgage down.
It keeps my mortgage down.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, anybody else? Okay, well, I don't think we need to take action on it, because it wouldn't matter anyway. So I just want to say thanks to the people that showed up to listen, and thank you, Jody, for explaining it to us. And I don't think there's anything else on the agenda, is there? Need to discuss. Anybody have anything to say?
Trina wanted to ask you, are you guys gonna write this into the record, what you want? What's your request from the assembly?
Well, I think Kurt will convey our message to the assembly, but from what we understand, our hands are, it's up to the assembly, basically. We can convey our message through Kurt, and hopefully that will carry enough weight to make them realize that it's yeah.
I have another question. February 22nd is the next hearing. That doesn't work well for a lot of fishermen, including myself. We won't be able to get our opinions in the meeting addressed. I mean, at least we won't be heard.
It's actually the 19th. The
That's
next
even worse.
assembly meeting is the 19th.
That's 2 days into the crab season.
Yeah.
No,
No,
it's,
No, this
it's
month.
January.
Oh, January.
Yeah.
February.
No.
Okay.
It's just the assembly meeting, and the assembly, you're gonna move forward on this, or?
Well, we're not even going to discuss the loan at the next assembly
Okay.
meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the second reading, is that right? Or is it?
That's the
There was
resolution.
no, they passed the resolution.
Well, no, we will
take the
discuss
loan.
this loan again once the project is done and we know how much it even is and how we're gonna fund it at that time.
You have any estimate about
So we have no say.
that could
Well,
So-
with the bid and everything, it will probably be, best case scenario, 15 months.
Oh,
How much?
wow.
By the time the project's done.
15 months. Oh, there, you're gonna talk about the funding in 15 months? Oh,
Well,
Next spring.
she's asking about the loan,
Right,
if there's going to
right,
be a
right.
loan, and we don't even know how much, if any,
Okay.
Gotcha.
that we'll need.
So you get the bid.
Until it's done.
Well, till
Maybe
a
I'll be
lot of
recalled
things.
by then.
Oh, I think you missed were you here? You might have missed the first part. Yeah, for a lot of things. So we're gonna try to sell some project land. There's a lot of
So
things.
what happens in the meantime? So are you capping the raw fish tax at $3.50 next year? Or is it still gonna hold to $2.50, and then cause it's, I mean, the Bureau usually takes your usually figures whatever you say they go with.
Well,
So
I
are you
think
gonna
we'll have to
propose
discuss that.
$3.50? I mean, I think that's what they're worried about, is the cap. When does that cap start? And for how long is it gonna be? Maybe 8 years.
I think
But-
we'll know once.
But
we-
what's the backup to this plan? I mean, we understand you have
Right.
to have a backup plan, but what if you don't start paying on a loan for 2 years? Are you still capping the harbor at $3.50?
I wouldn't think so.
Okay, that's a good thing to know. If you're gonna advise the Borough Assembly to retain next year at the level of $2.50, the harbor gets whatever
Right.
left over.
Right,
And then the
and
following
this year there might not be that, or this next year
It
you
probably-
probably aren't gonna get very much anyway.
Well, yeah, who knows? Okay, that's helpful for these guys to know that in the future, you're not going to move forward on this capping of the raw fish tax until you have to use the raw fish tax to pay the loan? Or are you going to start
Yes.
today capping and then at some point eventually get around to using it?
I was not going to catch it.
Okay, wow, sweet. That's good to know.
Okay, anybody have anything else?
I was just curious, the only time I heard anything about the raw fish tax issue was that last, assembly meeting. And listening to the borough manager talk, it sounds like he'd been meeting with you guys, and he stated that, is that correct?
I never had a meeting with him.
I tried to re-listen to the meeting, but it hadn't been posted on the borough website yet, but he sure came across like he had been meeting with you guys, and he was throwing this out there like, almost like he had your blessing on this.
Well, when the resolution came out, it wasn't real explicit as to how it was gonna happen, and
That's why you asked her.
yeah, that's why, I went to Jody's office to find out what the details were. And I heard that we had been,
That he stated publicly that,
Yeah.
he'd been talking to you guys about this.
yeah,
And
no,
there-
this
there
is
was-
all new to us.
There was something wrong with the recording of the meeting. Something happened. They're trying to recover it, working with the software people, but, so you might never hear a recording of the last assembly meeting.
Oh, the Nixon tapes.
That's on the radio station.
Oh, it's on the radio
Oh, it's on the radio
station.
station, okay, good.
I don't recall Steve being
Fish
at our
tax
meeting.
gate.
Fish tax gate.
Well, I was just curious,
A
he
long
just
time.
came across so matter of factly,
Yeah.
like he's been talking with you guys, and it's like,
Nothing recent.
yeah,
No.
I was just like,
No,
well, that's the
that-
first I heard about it, and I try to keep up on issues.
Yeah, we try to keep up with people that come to talk to us too.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to hear that recording and get it fixed, it's very,
But now we understand, because Jody has definitely done a good job of explaining it to us, so we know what the possible outcome is. So, anyway,
The
we,
assembly makes the decision.
yeah,
There's
so,
no-
just so we understand, so we can kind of plan ahead,
I want you guys to know too, I'm just one vote.
and it doesn't count.
Not when there's 6 opposed to me.
You guys all who came, it's probably even more important that you come to the borough assembly meeting.
Yeah.
Than this. You can see this doesn't amount to much. But come on the 19th. I think I'm gonna go to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you're not even gonna bring it up on the 19th, though, Joe?
I wasn't planning on discussing.
Okay, so it would be premature to...
She'll wait till Tanner starts.
Or I'm out of town.
You know, I can't put it in a supplemental budget because
Okay.
there's nothing, I don't know what the amount's gonna be. It's preemptive to. You can all obviously come and talk,
Could
on
you-
topics unrelated to the agenda and bring it
Well,
up.
how about even better, would you, we really appreciate you coming and talking to the guys about it, because everybody got rattled after that borough assembly meeting, obviously. Would you come and run it by the harbor board when you do in 15 months? If you're gonna use
Oh, yeah.
anything over, or when you're gonna start implementing that 350 cap? Would you just come and
Yeah.
talk about it then? Very good.
And maybe it'll be a
And
lesser
then-
amount and it will be 400,000 or,
You
there's
don't
so
know.
many
No.
variables right now
Okay.
that it's too soon to talk.
Yeah, and
Oh.
it might not be.
Okay,
that's good.
anybody have anything else? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'm moving.
Okay.
Nobody wants to go.